Chapter 1. A promotion with no applause. The email came on a rainy Wednesday morning. Congratulations, Madeline Chin. You've been promoted to Senior UX Designer effective next month. Maddie stared at the screen, blinking twice to make sure she wasn't imagining it. A cocktail of disbelief, relief, and something close to pride swirled in her chest. She had worked for this. The late nights redesigning interface flows, the countless user interviews, the weekends sacrificed to deadlines, they had all led to this moment. Riley popped her head over the divider. Did you just win the lottery or something? Maddie turned to her with a dazed smile. Promotion. Riley squealed and threw her arms around her. You did it. I told you. You were born to do this. Oh my God, you need to celebrate. Maddie chuckled. I will. Tonight. Maybe call my mom. The moment the words left her lips, the excitement dulled, like a candle snuffed out by a sudden gust. Riley caught the shift in Maddie's eyes and softened her tone. Maybe she'll surprise you this time. Maddie didn't respond. She knew better. That evening, as the Seattle sky darkened with soft drizzle and the streetlights flickered to life, Maddie sat on her apartment balcony with her phone in hand. Her thumb hovered over the call button for longer than she'd admit. She finally pressed it, heart thudding. 3 rings. 4. Hello, her mother's voice answered, curt and unmistakably distracted. Hi, Mom. It's me. Did I catch you at a bad time? I'm grading essays. What's up? Maddie hesitated. I just wanted to share some news. I got promoted. A beat of silence. Not long, but long enough. Oh, then a pause. Well, make sure you don't let it get to your head. Promotions are nice, but staying consistent is more important. That was it. No, I'm proud of you. No, you deserve it. No, well done, Maddie. Just a warning. A caution against arrogance. Maddie's fingers curled slightly around the phone. Yeah, I know. I just thought you'd want to know. I'm glad you told me. Her mother said, but her voice was already fading, like someone retreating into another room. Anyway, I need to get back to these papers. I'll call you this weekend, okay? Okay. Bye, Mom. The line went dead. Maddie sat in silence, the soft hum of passing cars below the only sound filling the void. She thought back to her childhood, report cards filled with A's. Awards for writing contests, winning the regional design competition in high school. Every accomplishment met with a nod at best. Most of the time, her mother would say something like, well, I used to win the state-level contests when I was your age, or that's expected of you. The unspoken message, you're still behind me. You're a lesser version of what I once was. At least, that's how it had always felt. When she was 13, Maddie had written a poem that her English teacher had praised as something you'd expect from a published author. She remembered running home, paper clutched tightly, hoping it would make her mother smile. Elaine had read it silently, then handed it back. It's good, she said. But you'll need to work on meter if you want to be serious about writing. Not wow. Not this is beautiful. Not even I'm impressed. Just an edit. The next day at work, Riley handed Maddie a coffee with Senior Designer Queen scrawled across the lid in Sharpie. You're glowing today, Riley said. Thanks, Maddie replied, accepting the drink with a grateful smile. Even though something inside her still felt hollow. Did your mom say anything? Maddie shrugged. She said not to let it get to my head. Riley grimaced. Ugh. Classic. I don't know. Maybe that's just who she is. Maybe I'm expecting too much. No, you're not, Riley said gently. Some parents just don't know how to say the things we need to hear. Maddie nodded slowly, sipping her coffee. The bitterness lingered on her tongue. That night, she took out her old sketchbooks, the ones from college, filled with mock-ups and doodles and dreams. On the inside cover of the first one was a note in her own handwriting. One day, I'll be good enough that she won't compare me to herself anymore. Maddie's chest ached. She had moved to Seattle not only for the job opportunity, but to create distance from the shadow that always seemed to trail her. Yet somehow, even from hundreds of miles away, it remained. Her phone buzzed. Message from Dad, divorced since Maddie was 10, heard about the promotion. That's amazing, kiddo. Drinks on you next time I visit. She smiled sadly. It wasn't that her father was perfect. He hadn't exactly been present most of her life, but he at least tried. He showed up when he could. And he said the words she craved. Still, it was her mother's silence that always echoed the loudest. Before heading to bed, Maddie scrolled through her email again. At the bottom of the promotion letter was a comment from the VP of Product. We've seen your leadership potential for months. This is overdue. Keep bringing your magic. She read it twice. And then a third time. Someone believed in her. Even if it wasn't the person she had always wanted it to come from. But Maddie didn't know, not yet, that her name came up often in the teacher's lounge of Sacramento High School. She didn't know that Elaine kept a photo of her TEDx presentation in her office drawer, watched in secret more times than she'd admit. She didn't know that just a few weeks from now, a passing comment would upend everything she thought she understood about her mother's coldness and force her to rewrite the story she'd carried for so long. But for now, Maddie closed her eyes. The rain tapping gently against the window, and whispered to herself what she longed to hear. I'm proud of you, even if no one else said it. Chapter 2. The mirror that doesn't smile back. Maddie stood in front of her bathroom mirror, toothbrush in hand, staring blankly at her reflection. The words she whispered to herself last night still echoed in her mind. I'm proud of you. She had meant it, but it felt like trying to hold warmth in a room with no windows. Fleeting. Fragile. The problem wasn't just her mother's silence. The problem was that Maddie had learned to measure her self-worth by how closely she mirrored a woman who never seemed satisfied. Elaine Chin was a legend in her own right. In her youth, she'd been the top of every class, the lead in school plays, the editor of the literary magazine. She had earned a scholarship to a prestigious university and had a dozen job offers upon graduation. But she had chosen teaching, believing it was the most honorable way to shape futures. And she was good at it. Everyone said so. When Maddie was young, people would always tell her, "You must be just like your mom." They meant it as a compliment. She never took it that way. At school events, Elaine would show up dressed in structured blouses, with folders neatly clipped and makeup flawlessly understated. She never raised her voice, never looked unprepared. She'd shake hands with teachers, nod at other parents, and more often than not offer polite deflection when someone mentioned Maddie. She's still figuring it out, Elaine would say. Even when Maddie had just won first place in science fair. Still figuring it out. As if Maddie were some ongoing experiment, forever unfinished, never polished enough for presentation. Do you think, Maddie asked Riley over lunch the next day, that some moms are just incapable of pride? Riley blinked. Whoa, that's a heavy one for someone who just got a raise. I'm serious. Maddie swirled her chopsticks through the stir-fried noodles, but didn't eat. It's like, I can do everything right on paper and she'll still find something missing. Have you told her that? Of course not. She'd probably say I'm being dramatic. Riley leaned back in her chair. Okay, but listen, do you think she's trying to make you feel lesser, or is she just emotionally illiterate? That made Maddie pause. I don't know, she said honestly. Maybe both? Riley softened. My mom never said I love you until I was 25. When I finally asked why, she said, because I thought you already knew. Maddie stared at her. Did you? Nope. Riley laughed lightly, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. But I know now. Later that evening, Maddie sat down at her desk, staring at her laptop. She had an idea, a design for a nonprofit's mobile app that her team had been brainstorming for weeks. Her fingers moved swiftly across the trackpad, lines flowing across the screen like poetry. For the first time in days, she felt like she was building something that made sense. Something she could be proud of. After an hour, she exported the file and emailed it to her team. Then, on impulse, she opened another window. Gmail. Her mother's name stared at her from the contact list. She hovered her mouse over it. Typed. Subject, promotion. Body, I know I already told you, but I wanted to share the official letter. I thought you might want to keep a copy. Attach the file. Then paused. Should she write more? Should she say something like, it would have meant a lot to hear you say you were proud? She deleted the draft, closed the laptop. Instead, she went to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of red wine. The kind her mom would have frowned at too heavy, too dry, unladylike. Maddie drank it anyway. That weekend, she visited a local art exhibit featuring Asian American designers. One of the installations caught her eye, a mirror etched with phrases like, "Be your own legacy," and "You are not a reflection of someone else's dream." She stood in front of it longer than she should have. The mirror didn't smile back. But for once, Maddie didn't look away. She thought of something Riley had said. You can't become yourself if you're still auditioning for someone else's approval. That night, back home, Maddie pulled out an old photo album her father had sent her years ago. Inside was a picture of her at 7 years old, covered in paint from an art camp. She was grinning from ear to ear, missing a tooth, holding up a drawing of a lopsided sun and 3 uneven trees. Behind her stood her mom, smiling, but looking off to the side. Not at Maddie. At something else. It was the only photo Maddie could find where they were both in the frame. She placed the photo on her desk, then opened her journal. What if I stop trying to become the version of me she wants and start becoming the version I want? What if she's proud, but just broken in the way she shows it? A week later, Maddie received a package in the mail. No return address. But the handwriting was familiar. Inside was a card. No glitter. No flowery lines. Just 3 words in Elaine Chen's careful print. I saved this. Tucked inside was the printed promotion letter Maddie had sent. It had been laminated. Chapter 3. Laminated Love. Maddie stared at the laminated letter in her hands. Her breath caught somewhere between her chest and throat. The plastic sheet was perfectly smooth. No creases, no fingerprints. Not a single smudge. It glistened slightly under the kitchen light, like it had been handled with reverence. Her heart thudded in her ears. I saved this. Just 3 words. But they cracked something open inside her. She read them over and over, as if some deeper meaning were hidden in their brevity. Her mother wasn't one for flowery messages or long calls. But she had gone through the effort of printing and preserving the letter like it was something precious. Maddie sank onto the couch and pressed the plastic against her chest. She didn't cry. But something warm, something unsteady rushed through her, like the sudden bloom of spring after a long, gray winter. Was this her mother's way of saying she was proud? Was this the love she had been missing? Later that night, she called Riley. Hey, it's me, Maddie said, trying to keep her voice even. You're not going to believe what I just got in the mail. Oh no, Riley joked. Is it another promotional flyer about finding your soulmate in 3 easy steps? Maddie laughed. Close. But it's from my mom. There was silence on the line. She laminated the promotion letter I sent her, Maddie continued, and mailed it to me. No note. Just the letter. Laminated. With a card that said, I saved this. Riley was quiet for a beat. Then, whoa. Right? That's like, huge. I don't even know what to feel. It's so small, but it feels massive. Because it is massive. For her, that probably took everything. Maddie nodded. Even though Riley couldn't see her. It's weird. I didn't cry, but I feel like someone loosened the tightest knot in my chest. Riley exhaled slowly. Sometimes love doesn't show up in the way we're taught to expect it. It just sneaks in through the side door. The next few days felt lighter. Like Maddie was moving through the world with a little less weight on her shoulders. She started sleeping better. She smiled more at work. Even laughed during meetings, a sound that made her coworkers glance at her in surprise. She wasn't known for being bubbly. Polite, efficient, brilliant under pressure? Yes. But lighthearted? Rare. Did someone switch out your coffee with champagne? Her manager joked one afternoon. Maybe, Maddie replied with a soft grin. Or maybe I'm just finally letting things go. The change didn't mean everything was suddenly perfect. That weekend, Maddie visited Sacramento for a design seminar. The city held both nostalgia and tension, memories of high school halls and silent dinners at the kitchen table, where her mother would correct her grammar mid-sentence, but never ask how her day was. She debated whether or not to tell her mom she was in town. Eventually, she did. The reply came in one sentence. If you have time, dinner's at 6. No emoji. No warmth. But also no avoidance. So at 5:59 p.m. sharp, Maddie stood in front of her childhood home, heart thudding like she was 15 again, waiting for permission to speak freely. The door opened before she knocked. Elaine stood there in a navy sweater and slacks, her hair in its usual low bun. Her face was calm, unreadable. "Come in," she said. Maddie stepped inside. Everything looked the same. The same framed calligraphy on the wall. The same tea kettle on the stove. The same smell, jasmine and faint old books. Dinner was quiet at first, steamed fish, sautéed greens, rice. All made perfectly. "Of course." Maddie complimented the food, and Elaine nodded once, as if to say, "Of course it's good." "I made it." Halfway through the meal, Maddie gathered her courage. "I got your package." Elaine didn't look up. She reached for the soy sauce and said, "I thought you might want to keep a copy." "You laminated it." Elaine paused, chopsticks hovering midair. "Yes." Maddie's voice softened. "Why?" Her mother finally looked at her. Her expression didn't change, but her voice dropped just slightly, just enough to hear the undercurrent. "Because I wanted you to know that." "I noticed." Maddie blinked. "I may not say the right things," Elaine continued, "but I see you. I always have." Silence stretched between them. But it wasn't sharp this time. It felt full. Then Elaine added, almost like an afterthought, "You're better than I was at your age." Maddie inhaled sharply. Not much. Not a whole speech. But enough. More than enough. When she left that evening, Elaine walked her to the door. Before Maddie could reach for the knob, her mother reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a printout of Maddie's first ever website design from high school, a clumsy, outdated thing with mismatched fonts and broken links. "You showed this to me once," Elaine said. "I pretended I didn't care. But I saved it." Maddie looked at the faded paper, stunned. "You really kept this?" "I keep a lot of things," Elaine said quietly. "I just don't always know when to share them." Maddie didn't trust her voice, so she just nodded. And then, in emotion so subtle it could have been missed, her mother reached forward and placed a gentle hand on Maddie's shoulder. It lingered. "I'll see you next time," Elaine said. "Yeah," Maddie whispered. "You will." Chapter 4. The things she kept. The plane back to Seattle felt different. Maddie sat by the window, forehead leaning lightly against the glass. Below, the city lights of Sacramento scattered like gold dust in the darkness, fading slowly as the plane climbed into the clouds. She pressed a hand over her chest, where her carry-on bag held two precious artifacts, the laminated promotion letter and the printout of her high school website. It wasn't the value of the items themselves that mattered. It was the quiet, invisible weight of what they meant. Proof that all this time, her mother had seen her. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not clearly, but with more love than Maddie had dared to believe. It was a beginning. The next morning, Maddie arrived at work earlier than usual. The office was still quiet. The soft hum of machines and the occasional click of heels on concrete floor the only sound. She placed her things at her desk, took a deep breath, and opened her design portfolio. But before diving in, she reached into her bag and placed the laminated letter against the side of her monitor. Visible, but not flashy. Not a boast. A reminder. "You okay?" Riley's voice rang out from across the room. Maddie turned and smiled. "Yeah, I'm okay." Riley walked over, eyes immediately catching on the letter. "You put it up." Maddie nodded. "Your mom gave you that?" "Yeah." Riley softened. "That's huge, Maddie." "I know. Did you guys talk?" Maddie leaned back in her chair, thinking. A little. Not a long conversation. But something changed. "She told me she's always seen me. She just didn't know how to show it." Riley grinned. "Wow. That sounds like a whole emotional earthquake, but in a good way." Maddie chuckled. "Yeah, like a soft earthquake. Still shakes everything, though." "Exactly." That night, Maddie pulled out an old cardboard box from the back of her closet. It was labeled Archive. "Do not open unless brave." She smiled to herself. Inside were notebooks from middle school, photos from college, thank you cards from past mentors. At the very bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, was a canvas she had painted at age 16, a chaotic mix of blues and golds, swirling like a storm with no center. Her art teacher had called it untamed potential. Elaine had said nothing about it at the time. Now Maddie wondered if maybe, just maybe, her mother had seen something in it too, but didn't have the words. She picked up the canvas and hung it on the bare wall beside her desk. It was imperfect, loud, messy. It was hers. And now, that felt enough. A few days later, she received a text from her mom. Elaine Chin, do you have a copy of the TED Talk you gave? I want to show a colleague. Maddie stared at the screen. It wasn't a compliment. It wasn't even, good job. But it was a request to share her voice. And that, from Elaine, was louder than any praise. She replied, Maddie Chin, sure. I'll send the link. Thanks for asking. Then, after a pause, she typed something else. I'm glad you saw it. Seconds passed. Then minutes. No reply. She shrugged and placed her phone down, not expecting more. But an hour later, as she curled into bed with a mug of tea and a book, her phone buzzed again. Elaine Chin, I didn't just see it. I've watched it 3 times. And yes, I'm proud of you. Maddie covered her mouth with both hands. Tears welled, not from pain this time, but from relief. From something finally settling after years of feeling misplaced. She whispered, not to the room. Not even to her mother, but to the younger version of herself, the one who had longed for this so deeply. We're not a failure. We were never a failure. That weekend, she mailed something to Sacramento. A small package. Inside was a framed photo of her TED Talk, but not the one from the official event. It was a behind-the-scenes shot, Maddie laughing in the wings. Hair messy, notes in hand, completely herself. She wrote a sticky note and attached it. I'm not your copy, Mom, but I'm yours in every way that matters. No return message came right away. And that was okay, because Maddie was learning something powerful. Sometimes, love isn't about the words you say. It's about the things you keep. Chapter 5, not a copy. Just hers. Seattle was colder than usual that morning, the air crisp with a bite that made Maddie pull her scarf tighter as she stepped out for her Saturday walk. Her apartment overlooked a narrow street lined with amber-leaved trees and the familiar rhythm of quiet city life, dogs barking in the distance. The soft whir of bicycles was comforting in a way that felt newly earned. She paused at a corner bakery and ordered her usual Earl Grey latte and a rosemary scone. The barista smiled as he handed over the order, scribbled with her name and a small doodle of a star. Big plans today? He asked. Maddie hesitated. No, just living. It was a strange answer, but it felt true. Back home, she opened her laptop, intending to catch up on emails, when her eyes fell again on the laminated letter perched beside her monitor. She hadn't moved it. Didn't want to. It was no longer just about the promotion. It was proof that something unspoken had finally been acknowledged. That the silence from her mother all those years hadn't meant absence, but rather a different language of love. One Maddie had never been taught to understand, until now. As she took a bite of her scone, her phone buzzed. Elaine Chin, received the frame. I placed it next to the one of you at your high school graduation. That one's always been in my study. Maddie's heart stilled. She had never known her mom kept any photos of her beyond the obligatory ones stuck on the fridge with cheap magnets. A second message followed. You've grown into someone I never dared imagine. Not because I doubted you, but because you've become more than even I ever hoped for. Then, after a long pause. I'm sorry if my silence ever made you feel otherwise. Maddie sat down on the couch. Phone still in hand, her chest rising and falling slowly. No fireworks went off. No sweeping orchestral music. Just the quiet hum of traffic outside and the calm inside her that felt like the first deep breath after being underwater too long. She typed back. Thank you, Mom. That means more than you know. And I forgive you. I really do. She didn't expect a reply right away. She didn't need one. That afternoon, Maddie visited an art supply store on impulse. She hadn't painted in years. Her hands had forgotten the weight of a brush, the glide of acrylics over canvas. But something inside her felt curious again, like a part of her long locked away had begun to stir. She picked out a small canvas, a few colors, deep blues, warm yellows, soft grays, and brought them home. She didn't plan anything. She just painted. Hours passed, and when she finally stepped back, the image before her surprised her, a silhouette of a woman standing in front of a mirror. But in the reflection, it wasn't the same woman, it was someone older, wiser. With her hand gently resting on the younger one's shoulder. It wasn't about approval. It was about presence. It was about being seen. Later that evening, as the paint dried, Maddie drafted a short blog post for her design community, a personal piece titled, "We are not incomplete versions of our mothers." She wrote, "For most of my life, I thought I was a failed reflection of my mom, that I had disappointed her in the ways I was different. I chased her approval like a finish line that kept moving. But maybe love doesn't look like applause. Maybe it looks like laminated paper, or saved report cards, or a quiet text that says, 'I'm proud.' We're not here to fulfill someone else's unfinished dreams. We're here to write our own." She hit publish and, for the first time, didn't check the stats. That night, she sat by her window, sipping tea, phone set aside. Her calendar pinged with an upcoming work review, but she dismissed it. Not because it wasn't important, but because it didn't define her anymore. For the first time in years, Maddie didn't feel like a project under revision. She felt like a whole person. Not a failed copy. Not an echo. Just herself. And somehow, quietly, miraculously, her mother's daughter too. In all the ways that mattered. Chapter 6. Quiet Rooms and Louder Hearts. The flight to Chicago was supposed to be routine, a design conference. 2 panels to speak on, 3 networking dinners. Maddie had packed her schedule tightly, just the way she liked it. No time for overthinking, no room for discomfort. But somehow, this trip felt different. Maybe it was because she had just begun to understand her mother's silence. And now, she was starting to hear silence differently in everyone else too. At the airport lounge, Maddie sipped a watery coffee and scrolled through her presentation slides. Her phone buzzed just as she reached the final slide, her name and title over a minimalist gradient. "Elaine Chin, let me know how the talk goes. I'll be thinking of you." Maddie stared at the message for a moment, unsure what to feel. A year ago, that sentence would have sounded like a miracle. Now, it felt tender. A thread quietly sewing 2 people together across miles of silence. She typed back, "Will do. Thanks, Mom." Then added, "It means a lot." No reply came right away, and that was okay. She didn't need constant proof anymore. She was learning to accept the effort itself. The conference was hosted in a sleek hotel near the Chicago River, all glass walls and polished concrete. Maddie's room had a view of the skyline, but she barely looked at it. She was too focused on preparing her talk, designing for empathy in a fast world. Empathy. It sounded so big on paper. But it really came down to noticing the small things. Just like the laminated letter. Or the way her mother had once tucked an umbrella in her backpack without a word, just before a thunderstorm. Or how she used to quietly refill the gas tank when Maddie borrowed the car. Love wasn't always loud. When Maddie took the stage the next morning, her hands were steady. She looked out at the faces in the audience, strangers, mostly, but somehow, she imagined one seat occupied by someone familiar. Not physically present, but there. Just like the laminated letter on her desk. She began. "We often talk about empathy like it's a feature we can design into a product. But in real life, it's messier. More awkward. Sometimes. It's a text that comes late. A compliment that never arrives. Or a hand on your shoulder that lingers longer than necessary. Empathy isn't always articulate. But it's there if we know how to see it." People nodded. Some took notes. But Maddie wasn't thinking about the room anymore. She was thinking of a kitchen in Sacramento. Of a woman who laminated a letter because she didn't know how to say, "I'm proud," out loud. After the talk, Maddie walked along the river with her badge still clipped to her coat. A soft breeze rustled the water. She stopped to take a photo, not of herself, not for social media. Just the way the morning light hit the buildings. She thought her mother might like it. So she texted it to her with no caption. 5 minutes later, a reply came. Beautiful. Is this from today? Yes, Maddie responded. You have your father's eye, her mom wrote back. Then added, but your own heart. Maddie stared at the screen, chest tightening in that familiar, almost painful way, the kind that comes not from sadness, but from something starting to heal. That night, she skipped the networking dinner and stayed in her room. She opened her laptop, not to check emails or polish designs, but to write a letter to her mom. Dear Mom, I used to think I was invisible to you. I used to think everything I did, every grade, every award, wasn't enough to pull your eyes toward me. But maybe I wasn't invisible. Maybe I was just looking for applause while you were offering presents. Thank you for keeping the things you couldn't say. I'm learning to listen differently now. I'm learning to see love in the quiet. I'm proud of you too, even if I never said it before. Love. Maddie. She didn't send it. Not yet. But she printed it and folded it gently, tucking it into her suitcase. Some words need time. And that was okay. Chapter 7. Echoes in the classroom. It was a Wednesday afternoon when Maddie received the email that caught her breath mid-scroll. Subject, guest speaker invitation, Sacramento High School. From Principal Julia Ramirez. Dear Ms. Chin, we're hosting an alumni career series next month and would be honored to welcome you back to Sacramento High as a guest speaker. Your journey as a UX designer has inspired many current students through your TED Talk, which was recently shared by one of our staff members, Ms. Elaine Chin. Please let us know if you would consider returning home to speak. The students would benefit tremendously from hearing your story. Maddie reread the email 3 times. Not because she didn't understand it, but because of the name. Elaine Chin. Her mother. The silent type. The woman who rarely offered more than a vague "she's doing well" when asked about her daughter. And now, sharing her TED Talk at her own school? A warmth bloomed in Maddie's chest, the kind that wasn't loud or dramatic, but slow, rooted, steady. It wrapped around her like a soft scarf. Later that evening, she called her mom. Elaine answered on the second ring. Hello. Hi, Mom. I just got an email from your principal. Oh. Her tone was calm. But Maddie could hear a quiet shift, surprise tinged with something like nervousness. They want me to speak at the school. Apparently, someone shared my TED Talk. Silence. Then, softly, Elaine said. I did. Maddie's lips parted. She hadn't expected her to admit it. I hope that's okay, her mom added quickly. Some of my students were feeling unsure about choosing creative careers. I thought your story might help. Maddie sat back on the couch, phone pressed gently to her ear. It's more than okay. Thank you. Elaine didn't reply right away. But when she did, her voice was careful. I don't always know how to talk about what you do. But I watch. I really do. Something caught in Maddie's throat. Not tears. Something deeper, recognition. A matching frequency after years of static. The visit was scheduled for 2 weeks later. When Maddie arrived at Sacramento High, she parked in the same lot where, as a teenager, she used to sit in the car for a few extra minutes to rehearse answers in her head. Yes, I finished the paper. No, I'm not trying too hard. Yes, I'm just tired, not upset. Now. She stood in the staff parking area, adjusting the collar of her tailored blazer, her ID badge clipped neatly to her lapel. Inside, the walls were mostly the same, faded class photos, dusty trophies. Hallway chatter echoing like a long-forgotten song. But one display near the entrance caught her attention, a glass cabinet labeled Women in Leadership. Inside, among engineers, entrepreneurs, and activists, was her. A printed quote from her talk read, "You don't have to shout to be heard. You just have to mean it." Her photo was framed. Her name spelled correctly. She felt something in her chest uncoil. The classroom was packed with juniors and seniors. A few sat up straighter when they recognized her from the video. Hi, I'm Maddie Chin, she began, keeping her tone relaxed. I used to sit where you're sitting. And I also used to think success meant making everyone else proud. But what I've learned is this. Success isn't about applause, it's about alignment. It's when your life starts matching your heart. The students leaned in. Some took notes. Others just listened, really listened. Near the back of the room stood her mother, arms crossed, watching. No camera, no notebook. Just presence. And for once, Maddie didn't wonder what she was thinking. She knew. After the talk, Elaine walked her out to the parking lot. "You were good," she said simply. "Thanks, Mom." A pause. Then Elaine reached into her tote bag and handed Maddie a small folder. "I thought you might want this." Inside were 5 poems typed, printed on yellowing paper. The byline, Madeline Chin, grade 9, student of the month. "You kept these?" Maddie asked, stunned. "I have a box," Elaine said, almost shy, "of things you thought I didn't notice." The sun was warm on Maddie's face, the breeze gentle. The parking lot was quiet except for a few birds and the low hum of traffic in the distance. "I think we both had a box," Maddie said softly. Elaine tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "A box of things we didn't know how to say." Elaine's lips curved, barely. "Maybe it's time we open them." Maddie nodded. "Yeah, maybe it is." They stood there for a while, no rush, no performance. Just a mother and a daughter, letting distance shrink by degrees. Not with grand declarations, but with presence, and paper, and the quiet courage of showing up. Chapter 8. The language of kept things. Back in Seattle, the box sat quietly on Maddie's desk. Her mother had given it to her before she left Sacramento. Nothing fancy, just a weathered shoebox covered in the kind of floral wrapping paper that looked like it belonged in a 1995 teacher's lounge. Maddie had carried it through airport security like it contained something fragile. Because it did. Inside, packed tightly without order or logic, were fragments of a daughter's life through a mother's eyes. Sticky notes with doodles Maddie made as a child. A 5th grade spelling bee certificate. A printout of an old email from Maddie at age 17. "Mom, I got into UCLA. I know it's not Yale, but I think it's right for me." On the back, Elaine had scribbled in red pen. "You always knew yourself better than I did." Maddie sat at her desk in silence for a long time, sifting through each item like she was touching a new dialect of a language she had spoken all her life, but never truly understood. Later that night, she FaceTimed Riley. When Riley picked up, she was wrapped in a fuzzy robe, eating cereal from a mixing bowl. "Well, if it isn't the hometown hero. You blew up on the school's Instagram page, by the way." Maddie laughed. "I saw. Kind of surreal. So, how'd it go?" "With her." Maddie turned the camera to show the box. "She gave me this." Riley squinted. "Is that a gift box from 2002? It's her version of a scrapbook." Inside the call, Riley's expression softened. "That's huge." "Yeah, it's like, I always thought she was indifferent. But maybe she was just collecting in silence." Maddie paused, holding up a yellowed newspaper clipping her name listed under Art Students of the Month. This was in 11th grade. "I didn't even know it got published." She cut it out and kept it. "Your mom might not be fluent in the same emotional language, but she's been speaking all along," Riley said. Maddie nodded slowly. "I think I'm finally hearing her." The next morning, Maddie woke up earlier than usual. Inspired by the memory box, she pulled out a canvas and began painting again, this time without overthinking. She didn't sketch or plan. She just followed instinct. What emerged surprised her: 2 figures in profile, back to back, but connected by a string of light trailing from heart to heart. One older, in muted colors. One younger, full of bright, clashing hues. The string was thin, but unbroken. Maddie titled it, "Held in Silence." She snapped a photo and, without hesitating, texted it to her mom. "Painted this today. Felt like us." 5 minutes passed. Then 10. She let it go and went back to work, expecting nothing more. But an hour later, her phone buzzed. "Elaine Chin, I saved every drawing you gave me. I keep them in the top drawer of my desk." Then another message. "This one is my favorite." Later that week, Maddie began drafting an article for a design publication she admired. The theme: designing emotion when words fall short. But this time, it wasn't just about UX design. It was about mothers. About daughters. About all the times love wasn't said but saved. My mother and I rarely said the things we needed to hear. But she kept them in drawers, boxes, between folds of silence. And I've learned that sometimes, the deepest love isn't spoken. It's witnessed. We all carry someone's unspoken devotion. The trick is learning how to see it. That night, Maddie received a short email from Elaine. Subject: unfinished. Asterisk, I was looking through your old poems. You never finished this one. I am not your echo. I am your. I've always wondered what came next. Asterisk. Maddie smiled. She replied, I wasn't sure back then. But now I think I know. I am your silence given voice. Your kept things brought into light. Not your echo. Just your daughter. And I'm proud of both of us. Chapter 9. A place to hang things. It started with a blank wall. Maddie had lived in her Seattle apartment for nearly 4 years, yet the wall above her desk remained bare. Not because she didn't have things to hang photos, certificates, even a few small paintings, but because she'd never felt any of them were enough. Not enough to justify putting holes in the wall. Not enough to say, yes, this represents me. But lately, something had shifted. The silence between her and her mother had grown quieter, less like a wall and more like a doorway. And in that quiet space, Maddie had started hearing something new: permission. Permission to take up space. To honor her story. To hang the things she once thought no one cared about. She spent Saturday morning carefully laying items on the floor, one by one. The laminated letter. A photo of her and Elaine. Taken discreetly by Riley outside Sacramento High, her mother's hand on her shoulder, both of them laughing at something off camera. A printout of her first article. Now shared widely among design educators. And in the center, the painting, held in silence. Maddie arranged them not by date or prestige, but by meaning. When she finished, she stepped back. The wall told a story. Not of someone who had succeeded in spite of silence, but someone who had finally learned to understand it. That evening, Elaine called. No prompt, no pretext. Just a call. Hi, sweetheart, she said, and Maddie froze, not because of the call, but because of the word. Sweetheart. It wasn't a word her mother often used. Not in years. Hi, Mom. What's up? I was organizing my bookshelf today, Elaine said. I found your 8th grade essay about empathy. The one about the dog in the rain. Maddie laughed. Wow. That one. I remember writing it in one sitting. You barely reacted when I showed you. I didn't know what to say, Elaine admitted. I was so proud. But I thought if I said too much, you'd think I was being soft. Maddie softened. I think I would have just been happy to know you liked it. A pause. Well, Elaine said gently, I liked it. A lot. And I read it again today and still cried. Maddie's throat tightened. Thanks for telling me. Even if it's a little late. I'm learning, Elaine said. I know I didn't always speak your language. But I'm trying. You're doing better than you think, Maddie said. And this time, she meant it. A week later, Maddie received a small envelope in the mail. Her name was written in elegant, unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a note. Your mother shared your talk with me. I'm one of her oldest friends and one of her fiercest critics. But I wanted to say, she's been trying. Quietly. Stubbornly and imperfectly. She's proud of you. She just wasn't taught how to say it aloud. But you're teaching her. Don't stop. It wasn't signed. But Maddie didn't need a name. Some words just arrived when you're ready to hear them. That night, she added one more thing to her wall. Not an award. Not a quote. Just a single piece of paper with 5 handwritten words. She's proud. She's learning too. And Maddie realized. Her mother had been learning to speak a new language. But so had she. Chapter 10. What we say when we don't know how. It was a quiet Sunday evening when Maddie finally opened the drawer she had avoided for months. Tucked beneath tax documents, old charger cables, and an unopened birthday card from a client was the letter she had written but never sent, the one to her mother, after the Chicago conference. Neatly folded, carefully typed, full of all the things she had longed to say. She had written it when the shift between them was just beginning, when the laminated letter had arrived and the silence had started to bend instead of break. Back then, it had felt too risky to send. Too raw. Too real. Now, reading it again, Maddie didn't feel that same fear. She felt grace. The next day, she printed it again. This time, she signed it in pen at the bottom. Love, Maddie. No edits. No overthinking. She folded it, placed it in an envelope, and dropped it into the mailbox on the corner of Pine and Fifth. She didn't text her mom. She didn't warn her. She just let it go. That Friday, she received a voicemail. "Hi, Maddie," Elaine's voice said, slower than usual. I got your letter. I read it 3 times. I hope that doesn't sound strange. But every time I finished, I wanted to hold on to the words a little longer. A pause. You're right. I didn't know how to say a lot of the things you needed. I thought being strong meant being quiet. But maybe being strong means learning a new way to speak, even if your voice trembles. Another pause, this one longer. I'm proud of you. For the life you've built. For the courage you have. And for forgiving me when I wasn't ready. Click. That was it. Just under a minute. But it was everything. That weekend, Maddie traveled back to Sacramento, not for work, not for speaking, but simply to visit. Elaine met her at the train station, holding a paper cup of tea and wearing the navy coat Maddie had always thought made her look like a school principal from a movie. Maddie half expected a handshake. But instead, Elaine reached out and pulled her into a hug. It was awkward. It was brief. It was perfect. Back at the house, Maddie wandered into the study, her mom's sacred space, full of books, grade papers, and quiet order. There, on the bookshelf next to a row of classic novels, she saw it. A small silver frame with the photo she had sent, the one from behind the scenes of her TED Talk. No plaque. No title. Just her face, captured mid-laughter. I like that one, Elaine said. Stepping in behind her, Maddie smiled. I do too. They didn't say much more. They didn't need to. That night, Maddie helped clean up the kitchen after dinner. She noticed something pinned to the fridge beneath a magnet that said "Strong women raise strong women." It was a sticky note, faded at the corners. It read, "Designing empathy is harder than designing features. MC." Maddie touched the edge of the note with her finger. You put that up? She asked. I liked the way it sounded, Elaine said. Felt true. I've read it every morning since you sent me your article. Later, before bed, Maddie took out a notebook and began to write. Not for a client. Not for a presentation. Just for herself. My mother didn't give me loud love. She gave me kept things folded, tucked away, saved quietly. I used to think I was a failed echo of her greatness. But now I see, she wasn't trying to make me a copy. She was trying in the only way she knew. To raise someone bold enough to be different. And I was. Chapter 11. Drafts in pencil. There was a time when Maddie believed everything in life had to be permanent. She thought success only counted if it was polished. That love only mattered if it was declared. That a daughter's worth had to be proven with perfection. But lately, she'd started to think that maybe the most important things in life were drafts, living, breathing, and constantly evolving. Like her relationship with her mother. Like herself. It began with an unexpected invitation. Maddie had been sitting at her favorite cafe in Seattle, scribbling notes into her sketch pad, not designs. Just thoughts, when her email pinged. Subject, Memoir Mentorship Program Invitation, Letters Between Generations. Dear Maddie, we read your article, We Are Not Incomplete Versions of Our Mothers. And we're deeply moved by its candor and grace. We would like to invite you to join our new memoir mentorship program as both a writer and a speaker. The program brings together women from different generations to explore family, identity, and inherited silence through storytelling. Maddie read the message twice, heart thumping. She had never called herself a writer. But maybe it was time to try. That evening, she called her mom. I got invited to join a memoir program, she said as she stirred soup on the stove. Elaine was quiet for a moment on the other end. Then, That's wonderful. Are you going to do it? I think so, Maddie said. But it scares me. Writing about us. About you. You've always been brave with your feelings, even if I wasn't ready to hear them, Elaine said softly. Maybe now I am. That simple sentence, maybe now I am, landed like a soft hand over Maddie's. The mentorship began in spring. Twice a month, Maddie met with a group of 5 women, 2 grandmothers, 2 mothers, and 1 young woman just out of college. Each of them came with a story. A mother who never told her daughter she loved her. A daughter who left home and never looked back. A woman who raised a child in silence after her own mother disappeared. And Maddie, with her box of saved things, her laminated letter, her once unspoken grief. One evening, the group was given a prompt. Write the version of your childhood story you've never dared to share. Maddie hesitated at first. But then, slowly, she wrote. I was raised by a woman who loved me so quietly. I mistook it for absence. She taught me grammar, but never asked about my dreams. She saved every poem I wrote, but never read them aloud. I thought I was chasing her shadow. But really, I was waiting for her to see mine. And then one day she did. When she read the piece aloud, the room was silent. One of the grandmothers reached out and placed a hand on Maddie's arm. You're teaching all of us how to rewrite the way we remember things, she said. That's a gift. Maddie didn't cry, but she smiled. And for once, she didn't downplay the compliment. That weekend, she visited a bookstore and found a section labeled Memoirs of Mothers and Daughters. She picked up a slim volume called The Language We Never Spoke, and inside, found this quote. To forgive someone is not to forget what was missing. It's to choose to love them, knowing what they tried to give. She took a photo and sent it to her mom with no explanation. An hour later, Elaine responded. That's a beautiful quote. I think I've been trying to say something like that for years. Thank you for hearing it. Maddie leaned back in her chair, phone resting on her chest. The wall above her desk, the one once bare, was now full. Not of awards or accomplishments, but of reminders. Of drafts once unfinished. Of conversations once avoided. Of love that had taken years to learn how to say. And now she realized they were both learning to write in pen. Together. Chapter 12. Margins and Markups. The first time Maddie wrote the word mother in her memoir draft, she froze. It wasn't the word itself, it was the weight it carried. She'd written hundreds of emails with mom in them. Texted the word casually, even joked about it with friends. But writing mother on a blank page, in a story that she knew would be read by strangers, it felt formal. Permanent. Exposed. She stared at the blinking cursor, then typed. My mother never raised her voice. She didn't have to, her silence was louder than thunder. Then she hit backspace. Deleted the line. Too sharp. Too early. She took a walk through the neighborhood instead. Her thoughts bumping against each other like rocks in a shallow stream. Everything lately had felt raw and meaningful, both exhausting and healing. Sometimes she wished she could go back to a time when her mother's silence didn't mean so much. When she didn't have to rewrite anything. But something inside her whispered. You don't rewrite to forget. You rewrite to understand. At the next memoir workshop, their assignment was different. This time, they weren't asked to write their own story, but to borrow someone else's. Choose a moment from your mother's life, the facilitator said, and write it from her perspective. Maddie almost didn't do it. She thought, I don't know enough. She never told me much. But that night, she found herself sitting with a cup of tea, recalling fragments. The day her mother had missed Maddie's piano recital and never explained why. The time she came home late from school and found her mom sitting in the dark, staring at nothing. That one rare afternoon when Elaine smiled so wide over a silly poem Maddie had written, only to immediately say, fix your punctuation. So she imagined. And she wrote. Asterisk, the letter is in her backpack. I know she'll show it to me when she gets home. I want to say, I'm proud of you. I want to say, you did something I never could. But I worry it will come out wrong. That I'll say too much or not enough. That she'll roll her eyes, or worse, look at me like she doesn't believe it. So instead, I make her favorite soup. I refill the gas in the car. I save her essay in a folder she doesn't know about. It's not enough. But it's all I know, asterisk. When Maddie read the piece to the group, she couldn't finish the last line. Her voice cracked, then fell away. No one pressured her. They simply sat in silence with her, holding the moment gently, like an heirloom. After the session, one of the older women approached her and said, "Your mother isn't the only one learning. You are too." Maddie nodded. And meant it. That night, she emailed the piece to Elaine. Subject: If you had told me. No body text. Just the document. She didn't expect a response. But early the next morning, her phone buzzed. Elaine Chin, I read it. I had to stop halfway. I was crying too much. You wrote what I never could. And somehow you made it kind. Maddie's chest ached in that way it sometimes did, not from pain, but from making room. Later that day, she pulled out her printed manuscript draft and, in red pen, circled the word mother on the first page. Then in the margin, she wrote, "She's no longer just a subject. She's a voice." And below that, "This is no longer just my story." Because it wasn't. It was theirs. Chapter 13, The Missing Chapter. It started with a message. Not from her mother this time, but from someone Maddie hadn't heard from in years. Subject: Elaine Chin, an invitation to speak. Dear Ms. Chin, your mother has been nominated to receive a local education award for her 30 years of service at Sacramento High School. As part of the ceremony, we're inviting one family member to share a short tribute during the presentation. Would you be willing to speak? Maddie blinked at the screen. Speak about her mother? For so many years, she had built her identity around the unsaid between them. And now she was being asked to fill in the silence. She hesitated, then forwarded the email to Elaine. Did you know about this? The reply came 10 minutes later. I didn't. But if you wanted to do it, I'd be honored. Another pause. Another message. I think I'm finally ready to be seen. The ceremony was set for mid-October. Maddie booked a ticket without telling Riley right away. When she finally did over lunch, Riley just gave her a quiet smile. You're going to write about her the way only you can, she said. With honesty and kindness. You've spent years rewriting her in your heart. Now you just have to say it out loud. Back in Seattle, Maddie sat at her desk for hours, staring at the blinking cursor. She had written about Elaine before in her journal, in essays, in whispered conversations with herself. But this was different. This was public. This was for her. And so, she didn't start with praise. She didn't start with titles or accomplishments. She started with the truth. For most of my life, my mother and I spoke different languages. I wanted applause. She offered presents. I asked for words. She saved letters. I longed for big moments. She made quiet ones. I used to think she didn't see me, but now I know. She saw me before I ever learned to see myself. She taught for 3 decades. Thousands of students passed through her classroom. But the hardest lesson she ever taught was at home. How to love in silence. And lately, we've both been learning how to turn that silence into speech. The day of the ceremony, Sacramento was wrapped in the amber glow of early fall. Maddie arrived early, dressed in navy slacks and a cream blouse, professional but soft. Her mother was already there, seated near the front, eyes quietly following each detail. When the moment came and Maddie was called to the podium, Elaine didn't stand. But she looked at her daughter the entire time. And when Maddie finished, there were tears in her eyes. Not wiped away. Not hidden. Visible. Present. Shared. After the event, people congratulated Elaine, shook her hand, told her she had raised a remarkable daughter. And for the first time in Maddie's life, she heard her mother respond, without hesitation. Yes, I know. Not she's still figuring it out. Not she takes after me. Just I know. And Maddie smiled. Because that finally was enough. That night, back at Elaine's home, Maddie wandered into the study again. Something on the shelf had changed. A new photo frame stood at the center of the desk. It held a printout of Maddie's tribute, typed in full, underneath the words. This was the chapter one was waiting for. Underneath it, in handwriting that could only belong to Elaine, was a single sentence. Thank you for writing what I couldn't. Chapter 14. The Gift of the Last Page. A week after the ceremony, Maddie received a small package in the mail. No return address. No wrapping. Just a plain, brown envelope with her name written in the precise handwriting she now recognized instantly, her mother's. Inside was a notebook. It was the kind Elaine had always carried, spiral-bound, lined, the kind teachers used to scribble grading notes or shopping lists. But this one was different. The first page read, "For Maddie. I didn't know how to say these things when you were younger. I'm learning now. This is for the chapters we missed. The ones I never wrote. And the ones you helped me find." Maddie's fingers trembled slightly as she turned to the second page. Each entry was short. Some were reflections. Some were confessions. Some were memories she had never shared. "You were 5 when you first told me you wanted to make pictures with computers. I smiled, but I didn't know how to support that dream. I thought safety was better than creativity. I was wrong. When you got that rejection from Yale, I wanted to tell you I was proud of how gracefully you handled it. But I thought you'd think I was pitying you. So I said nothing. I regret that silence. I laminated your promotion letter because I wanted to freeze that moment in time. To hold something you built in my hands, like proof that I hadn't ruined everything. You weren't a copy of me. You were a whole new story I never had the courage to write myself." Maddie read every word slowly, like they might disappear if she turned the page too fast. At the end of the notebook, Elaine had written, "If you ever write your memoir, maybe you'll include some of these pieces. Or maybe you won't. That's okay. Just know this. Even when I was silent, I was always listening. And I've always loved you. In the only way I knew how. Until you taught me another way." That evening, Maddie didn't try to work. Didn't open her laptop or reply to messages. She just sat by the window, the notebook in her lap, her mother's handwriting still fresh on her fingertips. In the soft glow of the Seattle skyline, she pulled out her own manuscript draft and turned to the final page. There, in neat print, she added a new ending. "This story was once just mine. A daughter finding her voice in the shadow of her mother. But now it's ours. 2 voices learning to harmonize. Not perfectly. Not all at once. But honestly. Bravely. The things we rewrite don't erase the past. They let us choose how it ends." Later, as she prepared the draft for submission to her editor, Maddie felt no fear. No hesitation. She didn't need anyone's approval. Not anymore. Because the person she had waited to hear from her whole life had finally spoken. And Maddie had finally listened. Not just to the words, but to the heart behind them. Chapter 15. Sunday Dinners and Second Chances. It started with a phone call that felt ordinary, until it wasn't. "Hi, sweetheart," Elaine said. Her voice sounded brighter than usual. "I was wondering, would you want to come down for Sunday dinner next weekend?" Maddie blinked, caught off guard. "Like, a full dinner?" "Just us. Just us." Elaine confirmed. "I thought I could make that miso-glazed salmon you liked as a kid. And we could talk. Or not talk. Just be." There was a pause on Maddie's end. Not out of hesitation, but something more tender. The kind of quiet that grows when someone finally asks you to share space, not out of obligation, but out of choice. "I'd love that," Maddie said. That Sunday, Sacramento was warm and soft, the kind of early spring afternoon that smelled faintly of jasmine and sidewalk chalk. Maddie pulled into the driveway of her childhood home, unsure why her heart felt like it was thudding louder than her car engine. Elaine greeted her at the door without a checklist of comments or a distracted look. Just a smile. And an apron. "You're early," she said, and Maddie realized that her mother looked relaxed. "I brought dessert," Maddie said, holding up a bakery box. Elaine raised an eyebrow. "Store-bought?" "Definitely." Maddie laughed. "I didn't want to poison us." "That's growth," Elaine replied, and they both chuckled. The kitchen smelled like sesame oil and fresh garlic. As they moved around the kitchen, passing bowls, stirring sauces, there was something new in the air. Not tension. Not even peace. Something better. Ease. Elaine handed Maddie a plate of sliced green onions. Remember when you used to sneak these into your lunchbox to smell more grown-up? Maddie burst into laughter. Oh God, yes. I wanted to impress my teacher. Ended up sitting alone because everyone said I smelled like ramen. Elaine grinned. Well, you were a peculiar child. I still am. Elaine turned to her. You're also extraordinary. And I don't say that because I'm your mother. I say it because I finally stopped comparing you to myself. The kitchen grew quiet. Maddie looked down at the onions in her hands. That means a lot, she said softly. I didn't know if we'd ever get to this place. Neither did I, Elaine admitted. But we're here. We're rewriting things. Together. They ate dinner at the table they had once shared with years of misunderstandings and unfinished conversations. But tonight, no one had to prove anything. They just ate, talked, laughed. And in one quiet moment, Maddie reached across the table and placed her hand on her mother's. Elaine didn't flinch, didn't pull away. She simply said, "Thank you for coming back." Maddie replied, "Thank you for inviting me in." After dinner, they sat on the porch sipping tea, wrapped in light blankets. Maddie looked up at the stars. You know, she said, when I was little, I thought you were magic. Elaine tilted her head. Why? Because you always knew what was missing: my keys, my homework, what I was too afraid to say. But I didn't realize then that you were just quietly watching, carrying it all. Elaine took a slow sip. I didn't always carry it well. No one does, Maddie said. But you carried me. And now we're both learning how to let go of the weight. They sat in silence, not to avoid words, but because nothing needed to be said. And in that silence, a new chapter began. Not rewritten, not repaired, just begun. Chapter 16, The Quiet Pact. The weeks after that Sunday dinner felt different for Maddie. She and Elaine began exchanging texts, not just about logistics or reminders, but little moments and memories. A photo of a blooming cherry tree in Seattle. A link to a new jazz album Elaine thought Maddie would like. A text at midnight, saw a dog that reminded me of you. These weren't grand gestures. They were small stitches in the fabric of a repaired relationship. One evening, Maddie found herself standing outside her mother's house in Sacramento again. She hadn't planned to stay the night, but something pulled her back inside. Elaine was waiting by the door with 2 mugs of chamomile tea. Thought you might want this, she said, handing Maddie a mug. They sat on the couch, warm tea between their hands. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Elaine broke the silence. I've been thinking about how we never really made a promise, she said slowly. A real one. About us. About trying. Maddie nodded, listening. I don't want us to go back to being strangers. Or just mother and daughter in name. She reached out, taking Maddie's hand. A quiet pact, she whispered. To be honest. To try. To forgive ourselves when we stumble. Maddie squeezed her hand back. I'd like that, she said. That night, they pulled out old photo albums, sorting through decades of memories. Some pictures were joyful, a toddler Maddie giggling with a cupcake on her face, a high school graduation with Elaine clapping softly from the sidelines. Others were harder to look at, a frown captured mid-argument, a folded note exchanged during a tense dinner. But together, they began to tell the story behind the images. The fears, the regrets, the love that had always been there, even when hidden. By the time dawn crept through the curtains, Maddie and Elaine had created something new. Not just a story of the past, but a shared roadmap for the future. Days later, back in Seattle, Maddie sat at her desk. She opened her manuscript and typed a new dedication. To my mother. For teaching me that beginnings aren't about perfection. They're about courage. And the quiet promise to try again. She smiled. Because this time, she knew their story was far from over. Chapter 17, Healing in the Everyday. The healing between Maddie and Elaine wasn't sudden. It wasn't marked by dramatic confessions or sweeping gestures. Instead, it lived in the small, everyday moments that began to accumulate. One morning, Maddie arrived at her mother's house with a bouquet of wildflowers she had picked from a nearby park. Elaine's face lit up, not with surprise, but with a warmth Maddie hadn't seen in years. Thank you, Elaine said softly, placing the flowers in a vase by the kitchen window. They sat down with tea, the steam curling between them like a silent invitation. On another afternoon, Maddie showed Elaine how to use video chat. It was clumsy at first, Elaine's fingers hesitant over the keyboard, her screen filled with sideways selfies and frozen smiles. But after a few tries, they settled into a rhythm. Faces smiling through pixels, stories shared across miles. It wasn't the same as being in the same room, but it was a start. Maddie noticed that the silences no longer felt heavy. They were comfortable spaces where words weren't always necessary. Like the time they cooked dinner together over a video call, laughing as Elaine accidentally added salt instead of sugar to the dessert. Or the Sunday afternoons when Maddie would read aloud from her manuscript, and Elaine would listen quietly, sometimes interjecting with soft encouragement. One evening, Elaine sent Maddie a text. I watched your TED Talk again today. I'm proud of you, not just for the success, but for your heart. Maddie smiled, replying, Thank you, Mom. I'm proud of you too, for learning to say it. The journey was far from over. There were still moments of misunderstanding, frustration, and doubt. But each one was met with patience and the willingness to try again, to rewrite old scripts, to begin anew. Chapter 18. The Strength in Saying, I'm Sorry. One afternoon, Maddie was clearing out some old boxes in her apartment when she stumbled upon a folded letter, yellowed at the edges. Her mother's handwriting covered the page, careful and deliberate. It was a letter Elaine had written years ago but never sent. Dear Maddie, if you are reading this someday, it means I finally found the courage I lacked back then. I'm sorry for the times I made you feel less than enough. For the silence that built walls instead of bridges. I was scared of not being a good enough mother, scared of losing you, scared of my own mistakes. I love you more than words can say, and I wish I had known how to say it better. Please forgive me. Always, Mom. Tears welled in Maddie's eyes as she held the letter close. She thought of all the times she had longed to hear those words. And now, finally, they were here. That evening, she called her mother. Mom, Maddie said, voice trembling, I found your letter. Elaine's breath caught on the other end. I'm so sorry I never gave it to you sooner. Maddie smiled through tears. It's okay. I forgive you. Another pause. I love you, Elaine whispered. I love you too. From that moment, the unspoken became spoken. The past didn't disappear, but its weight lessened. And in the space left behind, love grew stronger. Chapter 19. Threads of Forgiveness. Autumn had settled softly over Seattle, the trees shedding golden leaves that drifted through the cool air like whispered promises. Maddie found herself sitting at her mother's dining table again, not as a visitor, but as a daughter who belonged. They talked about everything and nothing, work deadlines, neighborhood news, favorite recipes, and childhood memories. One afternoon, as rain tapped gently against the window pane, Elaine brought out an old quilt. It was your grandmother's, she said, unfolding the patchwork carefully. I thought you might like it. Maddie traced the stitches with her fingers. Your grandmother was a quiet woman, too, Elaine continued. She taught me that love isn't always loud. Sometimes. It's in the little things stitched together over time. Maddie nodded. I think we're doing that now. They spent the afternoon piecing together stories, past hurts, hopes for the future, and the unspoken wish to heal. Each shared memory was like a thread, weaving a new tapestry between them. Strong, fragile, beautiful. Later that night, Maddie sat alone with the quilt wrapped around her shoulders. She felt the warmth, not just from the fabric, but from the journey they had taken. A journey of forgiveness, patience, and new beginnings. Chapter 20. New Beginnings. The morning light spilled gently through the curtains as Maddie sat with a steaming cup of coffee, notebook open on her lap. She reflected on how far she and her mother had come, from years of silence, misunderstanding, and unspoken hurt, to moments of connection, shared stories, and slowly healing hearts. Elaine had called earlier that day, inviting Maddie to visit again next weekend. We'll try a new recipe, she said with a laugh. Maybe you can teach me a few of your tech tricks. Maddie smiled. Feeling warmth spread through her chest. This is the beginning of something new, she thought. Not perfect, not without struggle, but real and hopeful. She reached for her pen and wrote. Sometimes the hardest part isn't saying goodbye to the past. It's choosing to begin again, to write new chapters, to see each other not as echoes or shadows, but as people who keep growing together. Maddie closed her notebook, heart full. The story was no longer just hers. It was theirs. A story of love rewritten,